Welcome, everyone, to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:30, and make acknowledgement that the Sunshine Coast Regional District does business on the unceded lands of the Seashelt and the Squamish Nation. Our first order for business is our agenda. We have an amended agenda in front of us. Do I see any other changes? I'm looking for a motion to accept the agenda. We have a motion and a seconder, and all in favor? Very good. So we have an agenda. We have a series of reports. There will be a time for we have a fairly large audience this morning, and there'll be a point in the proceedings where I will ask representatives to come forward and speak to us. But for the time being, I'd like to look to staff to present the report on the Hopkins Landing Waterworks District conversion options. We have General Manager Remco.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually not going to introduce the report. Our Assistant Manager Capital Projects, Rebecca Bort, is going to do that.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the results of the conditions assessment and feasibility study for the Hopkins Landing Waterworks District water system. These assessments were conducted at the direction of the board following a 2023 request by HLWD, Hopkins Landing Waterworks District, for the SCRD to take over ownership, operation, and management of their water system. This type of takeover involves a provincial process called conversion. The conditions assessment and feasibility study have provided information on the current state of the water system and assets, an overview of capital improvements that are required, as well as some system possibilities if the SCRD were to become involved in the Hopkins water system. The report today offers high-level options for the board to consider. If the board does not want to pursue a service arrangement for the water supply with Hopkins residents, staff recommend option 1. If the SCRD board does want to pursue conversion, staff recommend option 2. If option 2 were selected, staff would report back to the board later in 2025 with a detailed analysis of financial, legal, and operational implications of the options, as well as results of further community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And as it is my first kick at this can as chair of the Committee of the Whole, number 2, I neglected to ask for a motion to accept all reports. There we have, motion and seconded, all in favor, and there we go. So we have an extensive report and study in front of us. We have a recommendation that appears on page 3 of our agenda. And before that, I would consider allowing a delegation from the Hopkins Landing water system to come up and discuss their situation with the board for, I'd like to give you 5 minutes to, if you have a prepared remarks, or I'd give you the opportunity to come and ask questions, or have if you wish. I see some movement in the audience, so I guess. So when you come up, will you please tell me who you are, where you're from, and use the microphone. The green light will come on. And I'll give you 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, board members and audience. My name is Ian Thompson. I am the chairman of the Hopkins Landing Waterworks District. I have been a resident of Hopkins for only the last 44 years. My grandparents bought property there in 1927. My grandfather was also a director on the former waterworks. We have at Hopkins Landing, I believe, the last local improvement district on the coast. I know there's one in Thormanby, et cetera. but we are the sort of the last holdout. The most recent one that was taken over, as you probably are aware, is Grantham's, and we have managed to not be taken over as such because of the diligence of a number of volunteers over the last 20 years, and in particular, the last 50 to 60 years. Our senior administrator is Gloria Files. She was involved with the start of the waterworks in 1968 as we know it today. She is looking to retire. She's looking at Freedom 95. She's now 92. She's been doing her administrative job now for 63 years. We have board of directors here this morning. There's 3 of us left, and we are basically all in our 70s. We have a crew of volunteers, a couple of which are here as well, and we are just managing to hold on as far as being able to do repairs, and we're not getting any younger. Yes, I was the one that wrote the letter 2 years ago requesting. It's not a new item of discussion for the Hopkins Landing Waterworks. We started discussing going over to you, hopefully, 5 years ago, and we're well aware. We've been very impressed with the service of the SCRD members and also the study that's happened. So as you're probably getting the picture, we're aging out. We have aging infrastructure. That is us as people, and we, as you're aware, if you've read the report, we have aging infrastructure with our concrete pipes. This is nothing new around the coast because pretty much everybody used to have concrete pipes. Town of Gibson still does, and I know one of the major costs is doing an upgrade to current standards. So, on behalf of the board and residents of Hopkins, we are hoping that you'll seriously consider continuing with the conversion process. We're not sure what would happen, what we would do if you vote no against this. I would like to point out that one of the options in front of you today is an agreement for emergency water. We already basically have that agreement. The SCRD has been very good, and I'll mention the name Cody Abbott, in helping us if we have an emergency. The SCRD provides us with water, and I should point out too that it's a two-way street. Pipe water flows both ways. The Langdale Wells project, we have been helping out with that project in providing water when Langdale pump was not able to run. So it's sort of scratch my back, scratch your back. Anyway, I hope you'll take the whole report into really serious consideration. We appreciate what you do, but we're actually kind of looking at retiring, basically. That's the end of my
Thank you, Mr.
speech.
Thompson. Yeah, and you were speaking of the options that are available to the board on pages 5. And right now I'd like to turn to my directors and see if they have any questions for staff.
For the delegation first.
Or for the delegation. For the delegation first. Director Stanford, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for the staff. What would happen to where is our responsibility to our citizens and to this particular water system if the board, this current board, walks away from the system? Like, where is our responsibility? Does anybody know?
GM Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, there is no legal or administrative responsibility from an SCRD perspective towards these residents. In the past, as part of EOC activations and other unfortunate situations, we've, as Mrs. Thompson explained, we provided support as a good neighbor, but that's what we did. And they provided, several years ago, when the existing Langdale well was refurbished, they indeed provided us with water, and we had a temporary supply agreement in place at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon? Oh, sorry.
So as a follow-up, is there anyone who could tell me what would happen to the water supply of the residents if they no longer had a board of directors for their particular system or volunteers to help keep it going.
Staff wish to answer that question? CAO?
Yeah, our understanding is the province would have to intervene because they would be the overseer of the improvement district. They have, I believe, signaled to the regional district that they strongly encourage us to take it over, as it's the most natural fit typically. But the province would usually have to step in. I don't know if there's any precedent to that. We haven't done that research, but that would be the step.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, question for the waterworks. So the board wrote to the SCRD, and I know that you've held some meetings, but at the point where a decision has to be made, like, do you want to be an independent water system or part of regional water system, are you planning to like survey the residents of Hopkins to see what they want to do?
We could certainly do a survey. Knowing that we are not chlorinated, knowing that our taxes are half of what the SCRD taxes are, and knowing we don't have any sprinkling regulations other than Mondays, Thursdays sort of thing in the summer, most residents would prefer us to keep going as we are. But also I've heard from many, many residents that they understand that we're not able to keep going as we are. So I can't really answer that question at this point. A survey would be, of course, very useful. We'd be willing to do that, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Director Stanford.
This staff report provided a lot of details, potential paths forward, but one of the avenues forward that I did not see was the impact of the new Langdale well proposal and its possible pathway through North Road and any impact on this particular project. Is there any, I recognize this is a big question, is there any symmetry to the two projects moving in somewhat lockstep? Would there be any benefit to the new Langdale well project on this particular situation?
I think that's a question for GM Rosenboom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair. The Langdale, new well-field Langdale development would include the construction of a new transmission water main from the new well field to the Reed Road pump station. And transmission water main is something different than a distribution water main. Now we're going to get technical. A distribution water main is chlorinated water that is ready for consumption and has connections to users. Transmission water main is a closed main, go from A to B, and treatment will happen at site B. So the only potential cost saving is when the actual capital works along, let's say, Marine Drive were to happen at the same time. There could be some cost savings because you only have to open the road once and pave it once and put two mains in. A new distribution main for the Hopkins system and transmission main up to Reed Road. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. I'm going to go to Director McMahon.
Yes, talking of roads, Point Road is looking pretty sad. It reminds me of Ocean Beach Esplanade, which is in much the same shape. Is there, if you put pipes under a roadbed that's collapsing, presumably the pipes are just going to break. So does the Ministry of Transportation have any responsibility in this whole situation? And is there any way to work with them to upgrade the roadbed before, putting in pipes?
GM Rosenberg.
Thank you for the questions, through the Chair. No, there is not. Ultimately, it will be up to, we would have to engineer it based on what is required for, to avoid any impacts resulting from bad road conditions. And that might mean that additional support is required for during the main construction to avoid any future impacts of road conditions dilapidating.
Thank you. Two-letter answer. Director Stanford.
I would like to put the a motion forward, but if Director McMahon wants to have any other comments, I can wait.
All right, we'll defer to Director McMahon.
Yeah, I had one more question, which was why doesn't option 2 include a servicing agreement? Because obviously, even if we move forward, it is going to take some time to move this along.
Is that a question for the GM or for our CIO?
Thank you. Thank you, through the chair. There are currently commercial contractors offering services like this. And if we were to enter into a service agreement, we would actually compete with the commercial contractor, and I think that's not for the SOD to undertake.
Thank you. I'm going to thank our delegate here, Mr. Thompson. You can have a seat, and we are going to be looking at, is there any more questions for Mr. Thompson? Okay, we're going to be looking at the recommendations as they appear on page 3. We'll get to you. At the moment,
Go to directors.
we're going to go to Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion. It is basically the motion on page 7, but there's a couple of adjustments just to let the scribe be aware. So I'm going to read it out. So it's on page 7, option 2, basically, that staff further assess the implications of entering into a service agreement for the water supply to Hopkins residents and report back to the board in Q3 2025, and that the budget for HLWD conversion feasibility study project be increased by, I'm going to say 55,000, that's the adjustment from 40, and that that would make it 95,000. And the additional amount be funded from feasibility studies area F taxation. And that will include an additional 0.15 FTE, so that's a change, for 2025. And that the draft 2025-29 financial plan be amended accordingly, and further that this recommendation be forwarded to the January 2025 board.
Thank you, and I'm looking for a seconder for that. We have a seconder, so that we have a motion on the floor. Director McMahon. That's a residual hand. So, Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if Director Stanford can expand a bit on the changes. Thanks.
So thank you. I'd just like an opportunity to speak to this. I recognize I will get to your questions. I recognize this is a big jump for our operations staffs, that as a board, we have been struggling to maintain a workable work plan for especially our operations staff, and there's even more coming online. I do see the challenge of this, but I also see that there's a symmetry to bringing this particular water system into the other water systems that are in the lower coast area, an opportunity to bring all our systems together in a more modernized standard, that this will be happening anyway. I am very concerned that the volunteers and the people that run this system will no longer be able to do it, and we will be managing it anyway, like it or not, and it may be in an even more precarious position. So we'd be taking it on anyway. I just think this is, in the long term, the way we need to go with this particular area, given the challenges that we have with water and the potential to modernize the system all along the lower coast. So for those reasons, I would like to see this motion move forward. And what was your question again? The question, the reason I've made the changes is I believe the amount is a little under budgeted, especially in terms of community engagement. I also, with discussion with staff, feel that 0.15 FTE is a more reasonable amount given the complexities of this particular project and again, how it works with all our other water projects that are currently standing.
Thank you, Director Stanford. I have a question for staff. The emergency water supply agreement that we have, do we have an emergency water supply agreement with the Hopkins Landing? What is the situation should an emergency arise, and how do we move forward in making sure that the people of Hopkins Landing still have water should their system not be able to provide it for them?
Through the chair. Thank you, Chair. The current situation is there is no such agreement in place. So we've been operating last several years on a good neighborship agreement. If there's a water main break that cannot be addressed by the district, the improvement district, then staff have been able to provide some support, and most of those costs were, as I understand, recouped from the improvement district, but that's not related to the water supply itself. So if the board would like to proceed with option 2, us advancing this, an additional recommendation could be to include option the establishment of an emergency water supply agreement for the time being, until there is actually a final conclusion on the conversion or not.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director McMahon. I'm going to go ahead to Director Lee, and we'll come back to Director McMahon.
I'm a little, first of all, I think it's a great idea to do it. But where is the staff going to come from to actually manage this? We're not talking about new staff. Therefore, we must be talking about some other project that's not going to go because this one has been staffed. Have I got this right or wrong?
CAO?
Thank you, Chair. So it would require existing staff because they have the institutional knowledge, but there would be some net new staff. Our Rebecca Port has been helping with this project, and she is a temporary project-based resource. However, we'd still need operations staff, senior staff, communication staff. So that would be part of the implications as we start to assess our priorities coming forward. So it means that we would just shuffle staff from different projects to this particular staff. So it would have to be contemplated in where this new item sits within the priorities and where it fits from a timeline perspective.
I have a question for staff. Oh, you have a follow-up? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So what would, with the latest motion, which is a staff addition, what would the total staff then be that would be required to do this project? Is it 0.2, I know it's a tough question because it just got hit, but.
Well, we actually looked at it before the meeting. So, yeah, you're looking probably of existing staff, probably 0.1 of that 0.15.
Yeah.
0.05 would be the incremental for sort of administration and stick handling. So it's probably a potentially, quarter day a week that could in different surge times and more as you are embedded in certain types of elements of the project. So because we don't necessarily chunk off our time to that extent, but it is a very large undertaking, especially this next phase.
Sorry, my question for staff is there's existing knowledge within the Hopkins Landing Waterworks, and will staff be using that knowledge to its full extent and trying to allow the people with knowledge of the system to work with them? That's all I'm asking. Is there going to be a lot of liaising?
Thank you,
GM.
thank you, Chair. There's currently, I think, a good working relationship between our staff and the improvement district, and I think the additional FTE, as suggested by Director, is currently included in the motion on the table, will allow for that to continue to and expand on. A lot of the work that is required is actually not gathering knowledge about the system, but it's doing the financial analysis, doing the legal analysis on what the process, what the pros and cons are, and having community engagement subsequently on those implications. And one of the steps would, for example, is what do we expect to be the user fees and the parcel taxes under the different scenarios? It's that kind of analysis that is required to be first conducted and subsequently discussed with the residents.
Thank you for the answer. I've got Director McMahon with a question.
Yes, I had intended to go online and look up the provincial conversion guide for improvement districts, but I didn't get around to it. Is there any support from the province for this process other than handing us a handbook? But is there any possibility of staff support, financial support, expertise?
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you for the question, Chair. We received a $10,000 grant for the current work. So that is the provincial contribution, and we know for sure that that's it.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands here, and we do have a motion on the floor. It's voting all directors. I would like to call the question. All in favor? Very good. That passes. Director
Potential for a second motion. Not very good at these on the flies, but based on a suggestion by GM Rosenblum, I would also like to move that staff work to establish an emergency supply agreement with Hopkins Landing Water District through to the conclusion of this conversion.
And I'm looking for a seconder for that. I have a seconder. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Very good. I think, sorry, I'm new at this. I think that. No, there was no opposed.
Did you call for opposition?
Was there any opposed to this motion? No, seeing none, I don't believe there was. That concludes this section of the agenda. I would like to move on to.
Let's take a short break.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back momentarily. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are currently going on to item 4.2 of our agenda, the Chaster Well Maintenance Upgrade Budget Amendment. And I'm going to look to our staff table and get some information on this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before the board today is a request to increase the budget for the Chaster Well Maintenance and Upgrade Project. In 2024, the motor and pump assembly in the well failed while we were in the process of tendering the rehabilitation and upgrade to the wellhead. And so to adapt to our current situation, we're asking for an increase to the budget of $329,000 to facilitate a reconditioning and replacement, reconditioning of the well and the replacement of the motor and pump assembly with a more modern VFD drive that'll help us meet the community water needs. Yeah.
Thank you. I see Director McMahon may have a question. Go ahead, Director.
Yes, I have a question from a resident who read the report. He asks, is this an opportunity that we could pump more water out of this well if we have a new pump? Are we pumping as much as we are licensed to?
Manager Waldorf.
Yeah, so we're currently near the production license, but the reconditioning of the well, sorry, there's some feedback there. The reconditioning of the well and the subsequent pumping test process that happens afterwards will identify if there's any additional sustainable capacity there. And the license application process for that well is currently under review. It's a grandfathered license, and so we would possibly seek some attention from the province with regards to that if there's additional capacity.
Excellent. We all want more water. Director Lee, you have a question.
I think I understand when we might get it done, but I think it was, if I had it right, it said before stage 2. That's a kind of a esoterical answer. When do you think the earliest we can get this pump in? Because we do need this pump. It's a fairly substantial amount that we depended on for a lot of years.
Go ahead, Manager.
Thank you, Director Lee, through the chair. So our original target date was to have this well online before the end of May. With the pump failure and the resulting budget approvals process that was necessary, we're still hoping that we get it. I know it's a loose date when we say before the start of stage 2, but optimistically still in June. Pessimistically July, but I think it's mentioned in the report that at the start of those stage 2 water restrictions, we're hoping that the additional capacity from Church Road will be able to make up the difference in the early stages.
Thank you. I understand. Sorry. I understand the pressure that our infrastructure services and our staff are under to try to bring this up to full speed in time for our summer season, where we seem to use a lot more water. I have a question from Director McMahon.
Actually, as a motion, I'd like to, this is not only my area, this is my well. It's half a block from my house, so I drink this water, I'm pretty sure. So I would like to move the recommendations on page 78.
We have a seconder for that motion. I just want to reiterate that this is voting A, B, D, E, F, and C shalt. And we have questions on the motion? No discussion on the motion? No. Going once? Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor? Very good. Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, so that passes. Thank you for your time. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the 4.3, the 2024 preliminary surpluses and deficits. My agenda says insert. Thank you, Manager Wing, for coming to the table. Can you introduce this item for us?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is a preliminary 2024 surplus deficits report. Reason it's preliminary is we are not fully complete our year-end processes, and obviously we have an audit to go through. However, we don't expect any material changes to the surplus deficits that are presented. If any do come up, we'll certainly apprise the board of those. So there's an attachment to the report which lists all these surplus deficits, and then there are a set of recommendations for funding of any deficits that have been identified. There are 9 unfunded deficits that require funding, and that's a requirement of the Local Government Act that those be brought forward into the 2025 financial plan and funded accordingly through that plan. So I will take any questions from that.
Director Toth, you have a question for staff.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the chart on page 86, 87, the attachment, the deficits are never, never good news. But I do see there are quite a few services that have substantial surpluses in them. And I'm wondering if those are projects that we funded or we taxed for, but we didn't start, or like I'm looking at, for example, 113 finance, 247,000 surplus. 484 in public transit. Is there just sort of a high level reason for some of the services having such large surpluses?
Go ahead.
Thank you. In a lot of cases, the surpluses, I know in particular with finance, it's due to staffing vacancies. Any projects that have dedicated funding sources are balanced through any variance reporting or year end. So if there's an expenditure on a project, there's funding transferred in to balance that off. The only time that includes tax funded projects, if the funding is unspent at the end of the year, it is transferred into a reserve or appropriated surplus and then brought into the budget that way the following year. So the only time there'd be a surplus generated from that if a project is funded from taxation, completed, and has not used all or has come in under budget, that would potentially contribute to the surpluses. But in most cases, they are due to staffing vacancies. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm of the understanding that there are certain functions here that are not that don't have a reserve, and therefore any surplus is returned to reduced taxation. I'm not sure how that's determined, but I'll look into it. Director McMahon.
Yeah, just looking at regional solid waste near the top of page 87, we budget to transfer money to reserves for solid waste to fund landfill closure. Is that included in here, or is this a separate amount?
Go ahead, Manager.
That amount is included in that it's been recorded, and so that $900,000 transfer is certainly included. Yeah.
I'm looking to the board for any other discussion on this, or possibly we don't have a motion on the floor yet. Go ahead, Director Inkster.
Yeah, just quick cursory glance at the information provided other than the staff member speaking to it. Am I to understand that the deficit situation will be funded partly from taxation? Just clarification on it. I think it's $90,000 or something like that in the 90s. Just a clarification as to where the unfunded money comes from.
Go ahead, Manager Wing.
That's correct. So in the recommendations, we're identifying the recommended funding sources for the deficits. We always look to operating reserves first. However, when those are fully exhausted, there really is no other recourse other than taxation in the following year. So that's the situation we're in for the 2 fire protection services. Yeah.
Thank you. Director McMahon, you have a question?
No, I'd actually like to move the recommendations on page 81.
And I see a seconder. Do we have any more discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Very good, that passes. Thank you, Manager Wing. We're currently going to move on to 4.4, constituency expenses, reimbursement of directors' travel and other expenses policy, voting all directors. This goes to the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a revision of both the constituency and travel and expense policy for directors as an outcome of some directives that came through in 2024. So the revisions have been included in the staff report. The ones that weren't completely verbatim from the recommendation, there's a little bit of explanation there, but happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Director McMahon, you have a question.
Yes, I'm wondering under what circumstances municipal directors could have constituency expenses.
Go ahead. Does anybody have an answer for that one? Go ahead. We have a municipal director
Thanks,
who
Chair.
has an
As
answer.
a municipal director, I would love to explain.
Go right ahead.
So constituency expenses for the municipalities, like I have a Zoom subscription that I use with my community. That's charged to constituency expenses. District of Sechelt doesn't have constituency expenses for council. No. Like we have our conference expenses and we have our general government budget. But we actually don't have a way to expense something like a Zoom subscription for working with our residents. There have been the occasional meeting that I've attended that is a constituency business related item that isn't necessarily board business related. That would go to constituency expenses. I don't know if Director Inkster, I know you almost never submit anything, but I don't know if you've got any other examples.
I don't.
Director Inkster?
I think last week, thanks, Chair Bax. I remember last week, and I've done this before, I proposed a lowering of our constituency expenses, and that would look to you to analyze your expenditures and say, I only actually ever used this much. I just don't know where the savings goes back to. Does it go back to our taxation of the DOS? It's one of those questions because we're foregoing that particular communication method. If we don't spend it, it just goes back into surplus for next year. Although I was thinking and looking at this, and it's come up again, is talking to you about if we could figure out some form of communication to backstop the regional district communication on a number of issues, like to our community, because that's where some of the complaining comes from, on issues such as waste management and water issues. So we may have to have a conversation about that. But I actually, when I was mayor a number of years ago, I reduced it to, I think it was $500. I just asked for it to be reduced. I'm not necessarily proposing that now, but it's one of those expenditures we never seem to use. But we could have a conversation going forward. It's just, I think the decision needs to be made today, though, does it not? Yeah.
Yes, Director, the policy's been changed, and the changes are highlighted in the policy, and it's for clarification, and there is a reason for some of our municipal directors doing SCRD work to have these funds available to them. It just makes a certain amount of sense, and there's certain rules around double dipping, which also makes sense. I've got Director White has a question for us. Go ahead, Director White.
Do I have a question? I guess maybe I could include a question. I want to just really support this conversation that started here, that Director Mann initiated. I think this is a really, this is a piece we should look at here changing, that I think Director Inkster supported as well. The constituency expenses are now very precise to constituency meetings and things that really are mostly specific to needs of electoral area directors. And I think what Director Inkster raised about supporting the SCRD and big issues, communications, like honestly, I have a whole department to do that here. We do put out communications on from our communications department at the town of Gibson's, often sharing the SCRD communications to our residents to help communicate issues of solid waste, especially in our case. And yeah, we don't. There's not really any. We don't try to recover that from constituency expenses. That's our town communications. So there's not really any way of doing that. So yeah, especially based on, it sounds like there might be some agreement for this. I would support lowering. Now, I do agree with what Director Toth said. So I'll share too that a huge amount of my time as a local elected official goes to spending time as a regional director. And I think all of you can relate to that. We have a lot of meetings so kind of those day-to-day expenses like telecommunications and Zoom account, things like that, it makes sense that there should be some support from the regional district because I spend so much of my time as a regional district director. So the $100 stipend on telecommunications is something that we can access, makes sense. Other than that, there's not really anything though. So I'd support reducing the constituency allowance to $1,200 and then raising the that overage there for EAs to whatever the difference is. That'd be like $2,300, I think, instead of $1,000. So then the funds can really be for the electoral areas, from the electoral areas to do their constituency expenses. And we can reduce it for the municipal directors, as the last three speakers have all, I think.
Thank you, Director White. Are you recommending that we separate the constituency expenses from the municipalities and the regional district and the area directors?
Okay. No,
Page 92.
no, I'm saying reduce the constituency allowance from $2,500 to $1,200, and then there's another $1,000 there that is specifically for the electoral area directors. Increase that to make up the difference. So increase that from $1,000 to $2,300.
Yeah, so that's section 4.1 of the current policy would be amended, so we can consider other amendments. I also just wanted to maybe factor in some other touch points that might have been mentioned just from the budget perspective. So we have some motions from round 2 coming forward to the board for consideration today. So perhaps if there's any contemplation of budget amendments or change to that particular motion, we could do that later today. But
Thank you. I'm going to go to my speakers list. Director Gabias.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And on a different note, I just noticed that FCM has been struck out, and that was not part of the original motion by Chair Toth, and I'm just wondering where that came from. Was that from the discussion that we had? I see Director McMahon has. Was that?
Anyone care to answer that? Go ahead, Director McMahon.
I certainly suggested that we strike out FCM. If a chair or another member of the board wants to go to FCM, they can always bring a motion to the board and we can authorize the expenses. But FCM has become so expensive. Like UBCM was frighteningly expensive. FCM, we're looking at something like $10,000 to send somebody there, and it's not clear to me that it's worth it for the value, especially if you're only sending one person.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question and then some comments. Director McMahon sort of triggered me on this thought. In UBCM, AVICC, and FCM, where do we fund those three conferences from? I think I know the answer for UBC, UBCM, and AVICC, but I actually don't know where we fund FCM from. And it would be nice to hear confirmation of the other two as well.
We're looking to staff to answer that question.
Thank you for the question. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference is funded through general government, but only for the board chair and for the CAO, not for the other directors.
Thank you. I have Director McMahon, you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This question I raised some time ago, and does there need to be, now I'm into travel expenses, does there need to be some clarification here about gratuities? Because when I travel, I always tip housekeeping staff in the hotel, and I was paying that out of my pocket because it was cash, and then I found out that that was an allowable expense, but the policy doesn't actually say that. So I was wondering if we need any wording to that effect.
I see some reading over at the staff table, and they may come up with an answer for you, Director.
So, Chair, that's contemplated in the per diem. So when you calculate your per diem, that should be built into that. So depending on how you expense your claims, those should be covered in the all-in rate. If you're doing per item, then you might want to include that in your expense claim.
Thank you. Director Stanford.
Thank you. In negotiating between the two different policies, I just want to be clear that there's a policy with exceptions 5.1 on page 87. Meal expenses incurred within the SCRD will not be covered under this policy. Is it then covered under the next one? I just want to make sure that as I do board, it's page 87. Oh, yeah, it's page 1 of 4 of board policy.
Excuse me,
Title
Director.
Reimbursement for directors' travel and other expenses.
5.1, so that'd be page 94.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 84 on mine. So the point is, I just want to make sure that meal expenses or expenses are covered somewhere when we're doing specific board responsibilities, such as chairing a hearing for those of us that live far away from that particular meeting. And I'm sure it's somewhere. I've never had an issue with it, but I just wanted to make sure those kind of things are covered.
Thank you, Director Stanford. There are certain geographic constraints around the different directors. The rural area directors have got something quite different from some of the municipalities, and it's understandable that this policy has to kind of blanket everybody. So it's I'm going to go to our CAO. She has a statement.
Yeah, I think we just need some clarification because in the motion, I think it was directed that within the region, it may or may not, but there is some contemplation in the prior version where if it was demonstrated that someone was doing SCRD business, but again, it's been hard to determine what would classify as SCRD business. And we also ensure that when meals are covered in a event or as an SCRD event, that policies, at least for staff, and I think it was contemplated in the prior one, that an expense claim wouldn't be allowable because a meal was already provided type thing. So those are just nuance that need to be clarified.
Thank you. Director Stanford, your hand's still up? Residual? Thank you. I'm going to go to Director White.
Sure, we're talking about all kinds of things here, which makes sense. There's lots of complications to this. and I will get back to the whole constituency allowance for municipal directors later, but since FCM came up, I wanted to share that I did go to FCM last year from the town. It was a town expense. It wasn't that much money. It was not $10,000. It was in Calgary, so that was one reason I decided to go, because the flight was more affordable. And it was my first, in a lot of years as an elected official, my first exposure to FCM, and I thought it was really valuable. Actually, I think it probably depends on the director and your level of interest in these kinds of things, and engagement and professional development, and maybe a feeling of connection to what I found local government in other provinces, which I didn't have a lot of that feeling of connection before, and now I'm a little more aware, which has been helpful, I think, and I'm aware of some of the advocacy and initiatives that FCM is doing, and I'm participating in those a little more on behalf of the town. And I've even been talking to Director Gavious about the great benefit I think it would be for the SCRD for her to attend FCM, because she does have those connections to Quebec and other parts of the country, and I think would make a really great benefit for the whole organization for her to attend FCM and report back to us, and maybe she'll tell us it's a waste of time. Maybe she'll tell us she learned a whole pile of great things that she can share with the rest of us and connect us better to other provinces. And yeah, she hasn't. I don't think she said, "Yeah, I'm going to go," but she's expressed some interest, and I think it would be beneficial to us if once in a while we sent someone there from this board. So however that works, so I understand. Maybe it's a matter of not having it built right into the budget as something that is in this policy. It's something that, as Director McMahon suggested, comes to the board, but then we need to make sure we had funding for it too, I think. So I just wanted to raise that.
Thank you. Thank you, Director White. I believe that we usually send the chair to these things, should we? But it is the chair's prerogative to give an alternate. I'm going to go on to Director McMahon for another question.
Yes, on the FCM thing, we can always send somebody to FCM. We can always agree to, but if it's built into the policy, then it seems like an assumption that we are going to spend that money, and I don't want to assume that. We have a budget, we have an overall budget. We don't have a budget per conference, so it would also depend on, how things are going with our conference schedule and our budgets. Which reminds me, I was wondering when we are going to see the 2024 totals, because we haven't seen them yet for our travel expenses. No.
February 13th committee. We intended on bringing it here just with some movement with year end. We didn't quite get it on this agenda.
Thank you, CAO. Director Inkster.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love to see of those conferences, chair or designate, so that if the chair isn't going, then maybe it is the vice chair or somebody else. I don't like, in some of these cases like FCM, maybe one or two go. If we put it, I don't really want to see people arguing at this table and are proposing that they please, can I go to a conference that's important to them. So hopefully they can come and we accept their attendance. I think we all understand our responsibilities and accountabilities to the public as to why we go to things. We have a little bit of a recent issue at the DOS where we have some people going to way more conferences than others, and that doesn't include me. So because I'm busy, honestly, so I'm not going, but I used to. But you always hope that you can come back to the time where you have time and you can go, not be told that now this year we've cut it back. So I think we need to look at our budget on the 13th and see what we've spent, but we also need to allow those that want to go to conferences to be allowed to go to conferences. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Inkster. Director Toth, you have a question?
No, I don't.
We have,
Thank you, Chair. I actually thank you, Director Inkster, because I was looking at the FCM thing and thinking, chair or designate, but at the same time, recognizing that our expenses from 2024, I think we've been flagged that we were already in an overage situation. So, being cognizant of that and, being that FCM is on the other side of the country, I haven't really given it any thought, but I don't know that it would be anything I would even want to attend this year. Certainly when we see the balances on February 13th, it'll sort of inform, at least in my mind, what we're doing this year. Director Inkster and I wanted to go to that wildfire conference, we went to that wildfire conference in June last year. And we came to this table to ask for, permission to go, and we were basically told there's no money to go. And so if we don't put something in, it's gonna be easy to say there's no money, you can't go. But at the same time, we also don't want to end up with thousands of dollars in overages at the end of the year that staff have to find a way for us to wrap up. So it's a work in progress. It's just a stop along the way. I'm actually okay with it as it's shown. I think following February 13th, we can have a little bit more conversations about 4.1 and whether we should be changing it by a few $100 here or there, or FCM, whether it should be in or out. Like, we can still have that vote of the board to go, for somebody to go to FCM. And I think it'll be incumbent upon whoever wants to go to FCM to make a convincing case that FCM is worth the expense, wherever it is. So I'm actually going to move that we adopt the policies as presented.
I'm looking for a seconder. I have a seconder. We have discussion on this motion on the table. Director McMahon.
Yes, I was going to ask the process question, but you beat me to the punch here. The two things that I think I would like to come back to at some point are Director White's suggestion of changing up the constituency expenses in 4.1, but I don't really want to do it on the fly. I would prefer that staff check our arithmetic. And also the concern that Director Stanford raised about sometimes you do get expenses within the SCRD. And I can think of an example would be if I agreed to chair a public hearing in Area A and had to drive up there during the evening after, I could see that I might need some extra costs. So, but if we can come back to that, maybe on the 13th with the revised policy and then make any additional revisions, I would be fine with that too.
Thank you. Director White.
Off, yeah, okay. Audio's on. Yeah, kind of based on, I'll follow up on something that when the language is a little more vague, I'll describe something that I was able to, supported by previous CAO, expense as a constituency expense, which I can't anymore, which I accept, but then the limit should be brought down so like an example would be the Gibsons and Area Rotary Club would invite me to a meeting in Roberts Creek. To me, it's a regional thing. I would speak about regional issues, and they also always have dinners that you need to buy. So I probably have I've pulled this. It was an expense, but since this revision came forward, I pulled it, and now the town's going to pay for it. But that is something I might have been able to submit as a constituency expense before. And for Gibsons and Area Rotary Club, but it's now just way more precise that kind of thing would not fit. So the town's going to pay for that. But that included a meal. So that's the kind of thing that, I mean, maybe now electoral area directors would not be able to do or cover those expenses either. And they have nowhere else to pay for it. Like at least I do. So I'll just raise that for all that whole conversation that Director Stamford raised. Secondly, though, the whole bit about the constituency allowances, Chair Toth, when you made this motion and suggested that it be kicked up to another discussion, isn't this a place to discuss it? Like, how's that going to look? Are you suggesting that an amendment come to board? And I do appreciate maybe people are wondering what I'm talking about mathematically about the 1,000 and 1,300 and stuff, and may need some confirmation on that. I could send out an email or something explaining myself, but if that would help. But I just want to, how's the process going to look from here on if we're not going to do that amendment now?
Thank you, Director White. I believe there are a number of amendments that some of the directors have brought up, and I don't know if we have the time to go through those one by one today and make amendments on the fly. My corporate officer's looking at me and saying that we can do that. But we do have a motion on the floor to discuss, and I'd like to go to Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to talk about public transit for a second, and just want to confirm. It's page 3 of 4. I don't know. I'm in the wrong agenda, but.
Sorry, point of order. I want to let the directors know that when they're discussing part of the policy, it really helps for us to cite the number the policy is, and that way, because not all of our agendas match up, and that way we can find the policy within the agenda.
So it's under Schedule of Allowable Expenses, point 10, page 96, I'm told. And it doesn't really matter, but so am I to understand that any director now can claim a bus pass as an expense? Because I seem to remember that Director Toth had specified that it would be for directors who use public transportation as their main primary mode of transportation, but is it now open to all directors?
CAO, do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, so there is in that section the actual cost of a fare, because sometimes people do claim, say you're going to a conference and you take transit from, Horseshoe Bay to Vancouver, for example, that you can claim that fare. We also have had requests for people who primarily use transit. In the past, they would have to claim the portion to and from, but just I think the efficiency to just claim the pass for the month is what was the suggestion that's been included in this revision.
And I imagine that any director who has a vehicle as a main source of transportation would not make this claim. Well, I don't think that's really the right thing to do. I'm going to go to Director Stanford.
Well, as we seem to be going down the rabbit hole of what ifs, there is something that is missing from this policy, and I can work on getting clear policy language for next month. But there isn't an option for potential board members who have young children for childcare reimbursement. It hasn't been an issue, obviously, at this board for many years, but it is something I've seen in other reimbursements, and it helps encourage a variety of board representation by having that opportunity. I was in a position to use it. I didn't use it very much, but I did create it for another organization, and again, it's the principle of providing a variety of representation for people that need it. So not for today, because it just kind of popped into my head, but as we're having this kind of conversation, I thought I'd bring it up, and I can come up with something later.
Thank you, Director Stanford. Yeah, I'm going to go on to Director White. Thank you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I totally support that. We should definitely look at that. And I hope that can be integrated in somehow before this is finally passed. I'd like to give this constituency allowances another shot, because our corporate officer has correctly identified this usually is where we deal with amendments. And if I don't make any sense, maybe we'll try again later. But I'm talking about 4.1 of the policy. So in 4.1, 2,500 goes to constituency expenses per director per year. This comes from general government, so municipalities are paying into it, and yet, as a number of directors have pointed out, like we don't really have a way of using it. Like it's anymore, especially. So we can basically use up to 1,200 for that stipend for telecommunications. And as Director Toth raised, I mean, I think going forward, my understanding is I've got like Adobe software for my own device now that I have to pay like $30 to $40 a month for. That would come under there, that $100 a month now. So 1,200, like, so the way I see it, if the maximum could be 1,200 for constituency expenses per year, that brings it down and establishes that clarity that Director Inkster was asking, like how do we spend anymore? There's nothing there. Where does that money go? Is it go back into the budget or surplus or what? That'll just bring that down, and then we can bring up the additional 1,000 for electoral areas only to 2,300, and that brings everybody back up. It's the same. There's no budget increase or anything. It's just same amount, but it just clarifies that the municipal directors, we're putting in money to general government for constituent expenses, and we're capped at spending the 1,200. And then if electoral areas spend more, that would come from the electoral areas, just like, you know, I'm going to need to spend, the town will need to pay for other things that I do. And you know, my town expenses were just in the last meeting, and you know, they were up there. It costs a lot being a mayor. There's a lot of expenses I have to incur, so that's fine. So I can make that as an amendment. I mean, am I making sense?
Yeah, Director White, you are making sense. I personally use a lot of my constituency expenses. Historically, the director from Roberts Creek has used them to support the community association by having them take care of my newsletter every month. And I do see this as making sense.
Okay. So you have a newsletter. We have a communications department to send out newsletters at the town, so we don't need a constituency allowance for that. So I guess I'll propose the amendment then, that 4.1 be amended to change the number 2,500 in two occurrences to 1,200. And the number 1,000 to 2,300.
Corporate officer?
I think staff understand the amendment. If the board is good with it, we're clear.
Seconder for that?
We have a seconder for that. Do we have any discussion on this amendment? I have a Director White, or use your hand residual?
No, yeah, sorry. I'm down.
Director Toth, you wish to speak to this amendment?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to support the amendment. And I'm just trying to process the what that would mean in the ability for me to communicate out to constituents about SCRD-related issues. The town of Gibsons and the District of Sechelt do both have communications departments. Our communications department will, reshare or repost something that the SCRD puts out, but they are not actively communicating constituency-related issues on my behalf or Director Inkster's behalf. And so in this particular case, where you guys would be able to do a newsletter, a mail out, that sort of thing, lowering this to the $1,200 would prohibit the municipal directors from being able to communicate out about SCRD business specifically. So I hope I make sense. I won't be supporting the amendment at this time. Maybe down the road when we, have a look at our expenses for the year. Like I want to know where we've spent as directors and what those breakdowns look like before I think about the, cutting back, so to speak. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Toth. Director Inkster, you have some insight on this.
Thank you for giving me the billing of the one of insight. I will take that. I am, at this point, just uncomfortable with proceeding in this direction. I wasn't clear on the math, whether the amount that was left to us covers something that we've already been, in a sense, claiming for some of the electronics. That means we have no flexibility other than that. I was arguing earlier that we needed some flexibility. I also was confused as to whether the amount that we weren't spending and or giving back to the budget goes directly to the electoral areas, and is the math exact? So if we give up the certain amounts going to the electoral areas, exactly, so does that mean 4 municipal areas, directors give back that amount and it goes directly to the electoral areas? I wasn't hearing from the electoral areas where they were short that much money, although it gives them more flexibility. So I could see it's sort of a friendly thing to do, but I need more information before we make a policy change which does not allow the municipal directors to have much flexibility. The chair is also the district of Sechelt, but he has the chair function at this to focus on that. We don't have the mayor's budget and or control over our communications of the district. So everyone needs to consider that. We're council members, we're not the mayor, so we can't do that double communication. So I would think it would be fair to us to have further discussion before we make an amendment to the amount of money and flexibility we have with our own communications. We need to be able to back. I think that Chair Toth and myself need to have a side conversation. We will. About maybe backstopping some of the regional district communications on a number of the issues, as I mentioned earlier. If you make these changes, we have no flexibility to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Inkster. And personally, I have a hard time supporting this. It would increase the taxation in my area but it does seem, I'm on the fence at this point, but with the municipal directors here at the table opposing it, I'd probably have to throw my support behind them. I'm going to go to Director White.
Yeah, I'd be interested in talking to the other municipal directors about how we could possibly backstop too. I'm confused about the whole mayor bit too, because especially in the context of the District of Sechelt, where it seems the mayor does his own communications separately from the District of Sechelt by placing ads and things like that when he wants to, and I presume those aren't paid for by taxpayers' dollars from the SCRD or from the municipality. I would hope that that you guys certainly have input into the communications that do go out. But that's maybe the discussion you need to have. So I appreciate that. The way I read it, there's very little flexibility anyway beyond the in this amendment or this amended policy to incur anything beyond the 1,200. So it may as well bring down the budget to line that up. But if there needs to be more discussion, maybe refer this, maybe there needs to be a little more flex space there, if that's what Seashell's looking for, beyond 1,200, but maybe not as much as 2,500. Maybe this should be referred or just put off until the board meeting if more discussion needs to be had.
Thank you, Director White. We do have a motion on the table. Or an amendment to a motion on the table that we're discussing, and should this amendment fail, there will be an opportunity to discuss this in the future. I'm going to go to Director McMahon.
Yes, we've gone down the rabbit hole of trying to write policy on the fly, and I don't think that's a good thing, even though I do support, in fact, the suggestion from Director White. For one thing, we have a communications department at the SCRD, and if the municipal directors need support, then that would be the direction to go, I would think, rather than trying to do it yourself on a constituency budget. So, yeah, I guess I will vote against this just because I think we need, obviously issues are coming up here, and I think we need to revisit this policy before it is perfected. Thanks.
It's amendable at any time.
Thank you. Yes. I'm going to go to Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question and then a comment, I think. Right now, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a motion to amend that we're discussing? Okay. Yes, there wasn't a motion made and seconded. I hate to do motions on the fly, especially when we haven't had a chance to talk to knowledgeable people about what it actually means and sit down and think about historically what it means. So I'm going to vote against the amendment in that I think we should all have more time to think about it, and it's not a critical item. So we should have more time to think about it. There's no great big rush for this. I don't think, unless I'm missing something, but don't see anything
No, I
there.
believe we will have an opportunity to review this, at least in February.
Okay. And the second part is that munis are quite different from regional districts in that municipalities have a whole department behind the directors, to a whole organization behind the directors, whereas we have issues that are unique to our areas that we kind of have to stand up alone and talk about. And I think this policy allows us to do that. Things like newsletters, those kind of things that fit in there. I've often wondered about the chair's ability to communicate, though, on behalf of the board when the chair is a municipal member as well. But I think that after being a chair, I think the chair can use our communications department quite efficiently to do those kind of things through releases to the various newspapers and newsletters on the site. So that's into my thinking why, as well, I'm opposing those changes. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Inkster, you have further insight.
Thank you again, Chair, for that recognition. I would ask the directors at this point not to support this. This ties some of the municipal directors' hands a little bit, and in the end, it may benefit the rural directors with some more, if we play fair, with more constituency expenses. The DOS does have their own communication department, but I think this week they were talking about hydro wraps on hydro boxes, which is fair because they look good and they promote the local artists, but that's what they were talking about. And perhaps Director Chair Toth and myself need to maybe look at talking more about reservoirs and our support for it, and the solid waste plan and transit expansion and electric buses and rec facilities. Though, so we need that flexibility. So I ask that you don't support this at this moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Inkster. Director White, another kick.
Yeah, I'll just say, yeah, one last time, that's interesting that the municipal, I'll have to get my head around that myself. I'd like to discuss that with you guys too, the other two municipal directors, like how, if there's some opportunity for us to use these constituency expenses I don't know where I'd find the time in the day, but yeah, I appreciate you're kind of in a unique position where maybe there might be a need in this next year. But it might be through the District of Sechelt. I don't know. I'd like to talk about that more, but I don't think historically any municipal directors have really had that kind of own, like SCRD municipal director newsletter kind of thing that EAs have. But yeah, just the one additional, I just wanted to respond to Director Lee too. I would hope, just very shortly, I would hope that any extra expenses a chair needs to incur, because I know that well as being a mayor, you do have to have a lot of meetings all over the place. Would be covered as board expenses. They wouldn't need to be constituency, but that's just my response to that. I don't think those would necessarily be constituency expenses if a chair needs to have meetings on behalf of the board with people, or go to other events on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Director White. We have an amendment to the policy 4.1, changing the number 2,500 on the first line to 1,200, and the reimbursement or additional 2,300. And so this is voting all directors on this amendment. All in favor? All opposed? All right, that amendment fails. So we do have a motion on the floor. Are there any more? Director McMahon.
Yes, I'd like us to pass the policy on the floor. We can go back and amend it later if we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. So we're looking at the recommendations as they appear on page 88 of our agenda. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Very good. None opposed? Thank you. That passes. Now we're I'm going to ask Manager Crop to come and introduce this policy, this item for us.
If there's any questions. She wants to introduce.
Oh.
Thank you. So here we just have our quarterly report, or sorry, it's not quarterly, no, it is quarterly, sorry, for contracts that we award between 50 and 100,000 for your information. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Director McMahon, I do have one question on item 3, the pneumatic boring tool. Is that the kind of machine that goes underneath roads and you can steer it through? I'm excited.
Thank you. My really technical answer is yes, it's like a tube machine that digs little holes so then you can go under a sidewalk or something like that without ripping the sidewalk up.
Cool. Thank you. All right, I go to Director McMahon.
Yeah, my question for staff is, I know several times we've talked about changing the amounts that are required to delegated authority. Like, where are we with that? Because increasingly, a lot of contracts are coming over the $50,000 limit and coming to the board, and maybe they don't need to. Thanks.
That is an interesting question because of rising costs. I was wondering if there's any way to deal with these type of discrepancies that we're coming up against. CAO, do you have any insight on this? I'm going to use that word again.
So internally, we do have the delegation bylaw on the list of bylaws that need attention. There's a few that are taking precedence, so we hope to have some time to address and review some of those elements that have identified need attention this year.
Thank you. So it's on the agenda. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I assume item 2 in that table for the water treatment chemicals is material that our plant operators use regularly. So I actually have 2 questions. If the answer to that is correct, I have another question.
Thank you. Manager Crop.
Thank you for the question. I know the ISO pack is something that we do order regularly, but I don't know the technical side of it, so we can follow up if you would like.
Yes, that's something that I don't think they should be waiting for us to approve. It's a routine expense that's been going on for years. And if you happen to purchase it all at once or one every month, what the hell?
Director, this is a report. This is a report for our information. So it's the approval's already been made.
Okay. So
Because
this
of
is
the
just
because of the
for
policy
our
for contracts within this price range.
Yeah.
That's an automatic approval.
Well,
But it's
I
something
still- I
that
still
price range
don't-
is something we're going to be we're going to look at again in the near future.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
So I think we've got our limit. We need some more rules around this and limits around this, I think. We don't want to waste our staff's time.
I don't see any more questions. Thank you, Manager Crop. We're going to move on to, we're going to move on to committee meeting minutes. We have the Sunshine Coast Regional Accessibility Advisory Committee, as well as the Ports Monitoring Committee. And I did give the directors that were in attendance to these minutes a heads up to try to bring the meeting minutes off the page and let us know what was happening at these meetings. So I believe it was Director McMahon was at the Sunshine Coast Regional Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting. Do you have some words to share with us?
Well, just to reiterate what was in the minutes is that the local governments each did a bit of an internal scan on their own accessibility. And that was a useful exercise, in part just to make staff more aware of the new legislation around accessibility and barriers that occur. And, a handy dart came up again. It's a perennial favorite for the SCRD. Right now, the staff are pursuing getting a consultant to assist with this committee, because trying to do it on our existing resources off the sides of desks is really difficult. And there needs to be quite a bit of support for this committee, because the people with disabilities on the committee do not necessarily understand the different jurisdictions of government that are responsible for different programs and services and road crossings and so forth. And it's a bit of a it's a bit of a maze for them to try and navigate. And so there needs to be a translation between the problems and the government services departments and so forth.
Thank you for that. Are there any changes or omissions in the meeting minutes?
Not up to us, it's just your policy.
And it's not here, it says voting all directors.
Just ignore that part.
Okay, I'm going to ignore that part. And so we've got those meeting minutes, and I'm going to move to Director Stanford to discuss a little bit about the Ports Monitoring Committee meeting minutes of December 10th, because I know it's very near and dear to her heart.
Thank you, Chair. One of the pleasant things about attending the Ports Committee is it's very operational in nature. So you see things happening in your port area and you report on it, or there's upgrades or work being done. So it's different from most committees that we have set up. And it's just a nice change of pace. Everyone is very connected to their particular dock, and there's all sorts of information that comes out of it. I'd just like to highlight that you probably got notice in your inbox yesterday that work is to begin on Hopkins Landing, like for like rebuild project next week. And I think that's really helped the community regain their focus on their community. That is a big part of their activity, especially in the summer, but all through the year. That is a big part of who they are, is that Langdale Landing, or sorry, Hopkins Landing. So yeah, those are the good things that come out of the Ports Committee. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you for that. Do we have any communications? We have no communications, we have no new business, we have no in-camera. And so I would like to call for an adjournment. I see an adjourn. Do I see a seconder? Any questions on the motion? No? All in favor? Very good. We are adjourned. Thank you. There's no attendees, and so we are finished here. Thank you.